My name is Sandra Jeffery. For 14 years, I gave everything I had to Vanton Logistics. I missed family and friends' birthdays. I gave them weekends. I gave them holidays. I gave them the years when my son was small and still asked why I was always working late. I missed school plays because a freight crisis in Korea needed my signature. I spent one Christmas Eve asleep in an airport chair in Frankfurt because a customs dispute threatened a major account. I worked through migraines, fevers, and grief and slept in airport chairs to keep contracts alive. And I believed, like so many loyal employees believe, that sacrifice meant something. I believed the company would honor me because I had honored it. I believed loyalty mattered. I thought it would protect me. I was wrong. The day it ended began like any other Monday. The coffee in the break room tasted burnt. The printers jammed. The operations floor hummed with the ordinary stress of people moving cargo across continents. At 10:14 a.m., Nicholas Fitcher's assistant appeared beside my desk. "Mr. Fitz her wants you in the boardroom." Her voice sounded strange. Too careful. Something inside me tightened. The glass boardroom overlooked downtown. I had sat in that room dozens of times negotiating contracts. That day it felt cold. Nicholas sat at the head of the table. Human Resources sat beside him. A thin folder lay in front of him. He offered me a seat. He pushed the folder across the table. "Restructuring," he said. "Your role is being eliminated." 14 years reduced to 7 words. My job was gone. I stayed calm. I had prepared. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I opened my own folder and placed my employment contract on the table. I had prepared for the possibility of layoffs. I knew exactly what I was entitled to. 6 months severance, I said. Health coverage continuation. My earned annual bonus. Nicholas leaned back. "Mile." I asked for what my signed contract promised. 6 months of severance pay. Health coverage. My earned annual bonus. Nicholas leaned back and smiled like I was asking for something that would never happen. It was a smile I had seen him use on vendors right before crushing them. "You'll take 2 weeks' pay," he said. "Or nothing." I pointed to the contract. Signed by him. Signed by me. Dated 14 years earlier. He picked it up. Held it. Looked at me. He tore it slowly, deliberately and cleanly in half, right in front of me. That was the moment something inside me changed forever. I can still hear the sound paper made in his hands. That sound changed my life. "If you fight me," he said, "no one in this city hires you again." I stared at him. The torn contract. At the man I had spent 14 years helping succeed. And something inside me hardened. Then he made a mistake that would later cost him everything. He said again, if I fought him, no company in this city would ever hire me again. I packed my office into a cardboard box. 1 framed photo. 2 notebooks. Coffee mug. 14 years reduced to what I could carry in my arms. In the elevator, payroll officer James Pike stepped beside me. He kept his eyes forward. Did not look at me. And whispered, "Don't let this go. There is more you don't know." The doors opened. He walked away. And left me standing there with a sentence that would destroy an empire. That night I opened my old backup drive, searching for proof to support my severance claim. At first I was looking for evidence to support a severance claim. Nothing more. I found something far bigger than a contract dispute. Before the sun came up, I understood the truth. Nicholas had not fired me to cut costs. He fired me because I had become dangerous to him. The next morning I spread everything across my kitchen table. Expense reports, vendor contracts, old invoices, shipment records going back years. First it all looked routine. Then patterns began to appear. The same supplier kept winning bids at prices far above market rate. Nicholas had approved every single one. A company name I had never seen before kept appearing in the payment records. North Quay Services. I called James from a borrowed phone. He told me North Quay had no warehouse, no trucks, and no employees on record anywhere. Yet millions of dollars had moved through its accounts. My stomach dropped. Then James said the words that turned my fear into something sharper. Your name is on some of the approvals. I understood immediately. Nicholas often rushed papers across my desk before meetings. I had signed routing forms, not payment authorizations. At least that was what I had believed at the time. If fraud came to light, I could be made to look involved. Now I understood why he had denied my severance. He needed me scared, broke, and too frightened to speak. I found my old work laptop backup in a storage unit. It held messages that IT had deleted from company servers years before. One thread showed Nicholas ordering records altered after an internal audit warning. I printed every page. Then a black SUV parked outside my apartment and sat there for 2 full hours without moving. That night my doorbell rang. No one stood there. Just a plain envelope on the step. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 4 typed words. Stop digging. No name. No signature. I should have gone to the police. Instead I kept digging. I needed proof strong enough to stand against a powerful man with powerful lawyers. James agreed to meet me at a diner near the rail yard. He looked terrified when he arrived. He slid a flash drive under his coffee mug and told me not to call him again after that night. The drive held internal transfer records. Money had been routed from inflated vendor payments into private accounts. One account was linked to Nicholas's brother-in-law. Another discovery hit me harder. An executive pension fund had been quietly drained. That fund held retirement savings belonging to long-term employees. People I had worked beside for years. People who had trusted Van Ton Logistics with everything they had saved. Anger settled into something cold and solid inside me. But James had even worse news. Nicholas was already preparing to blame accounting irregularities on a recently fired operations manager. Me. He had drafted an internal memo naming me as the responsible party. I made 3 encrypted copies of all the files immediately. 1 to my personal email. 1 to a secure cloud vault. 1 on a drive hidden inside a cereal box in my kitchen cabinet. Paranoid? Maybe. Then I came home to find my apartment had been searched. Nothing was stolen. But drawers were open and files had been disturbed. Someone wanted me to know they had been inside. I sat on the floor shaking. Then I did the thing that turned everything around. I called Wendy Quinn, a labor attorney I had helped during a shipping strike years before. She listened in complete silence. Then said, "If this is real, we are not chasing severance anymore. We are taking down a system." For the first time since being fired, I smiled. Wendy gave me 3 clear rules. Never contact Nicholas directly. Never threaten him. Never warn him that anything was coming. Document everything. Preserve everything. She filed a formal demand letter about my severance to create a clean legal record. Behind the scenes, she quietly connected me with a financial crimes reporter named Collins Voss. We met in a busy bookstore. I handed him redacted samples of the documents I had collected. He read 2 pages without looking up. Then he raised his eyes slowly. "If these hold," he said, "this is front page." But we still needed one undeniable piece of evidence to anchor the whole story. Then fate delivered it. A former warehouse manager named Felix Boone called after hearing about my firing. He said Nicholas had ordered ghost freight invoices created during a port shutdown. Felix had refused to cooperate and been pushed out. He had kept every copy. We met in his garage. Inside dusty cardboard boxes were signed manifests for shipments that had never happened. Fake loads. Real payments. Millions of dollars. Nicholas had built his entire empire on paper trucks that never moved. Collins said he needed 1 week to verify everything. Wendy said hold steady. Then my bank account was frozen without warning. Fraud review. No access to my own money. Minutes later, Nicholas emailed from a personal address. Take the 2 weeks. Sign the release. Walk away quietly. He believed the pressure was working. He was right about the pressure. He was wrong about my answer. Typed 1 line back. Once I sent it, there was no road back. 3 days later Collins called before sunrise. Your story is bigger than we thought. Federal regulators were already quietly reviewing pension shortages connected to Vanton. Nicholas was under soft scrutiny without realizing it. Our evidence could be enough to trigger a formal federal investigation. Wendy decided we should go to the regulators before publishing anything. We spent 2 full days preparing a careful package of documents to hand over. But before we could deliver it, James disappeared. His phone went dead. His desk at the company was cleaned out. Nobody there would say a word about him. Panic. Had something happened to him? That night an unknown number called my phone. It was James whispering. He was hiding at a relative's home. Company security had questioned him for hours. Someone inside Vanton knew he had shared information with me. Before the call ended, he managed to tell me one thing. Nicholas kept original handwritten ledgers in a private off-site storage location. Suite 408. Calder Building. Then the line cut off. Wendy told me firmly not to go anywhere near that building. So naturally I thought about nothing else until midnight. Parked 2 blocks away. A side door latch was already broken. I climbed 4 dark flights. Found suite 408. The cabinets were all locked. But one drawer stood open. Inside was a handwritten ledger. Initials. Dollar amounts. And names of public officials, auditors, even a board member. This was no longer just financial fraud. This was corruption reaching far beyond one company. Then footsteps sounded in the hallway just outside the door. I held completely still as the door handle turned. Flashlight beam cut across the darkroom. 2 men stepped inside. One of them said, "He told us the records should already be gone." They were there to destroy the evidence. A phone buzzed in one man's pocket. He stepped back into the hallway to answer it. The second man moved toward a box near where I crouched behind a cabinet. Moved. I slipped through the open door, ran down the stairs without stopping, and did not slow until I reached my car 2 blocks away. I drove directly to Wendy's office with my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold the wheel. The ledger was real. Wendy photographed every single page before dawn. Then she did something bold. She filed a formal whistleblower complaint with federal regulators, naming Nicholas Fitcher specifically. Once that filing was made, any retaliation against me became far more legally dangerous for Nicholas. At noon he called me directly for the first time. His voice was calm and smooth. He offered my full severance, then double, then said we could handle everything like professionals. I asked why he was suddenly so generous. Silence. Then he said, "You don't understand who else falls if I fall." That line sat in my chest like a stone. That evening Collins texted me. Publication set for Friday. 2 days. I should have felt like I was winning. Instead I saw a cornered man. And cornered men do reckless things. When I reached home my apartment door stood open. My files were gone. All of them. Except one photograph left on the table. It showed me leaving the Calder building. Someone had been watching me the entire time. That night I moved into Wendy's guest room. We assumed our phones were being monitored. We worked on paper and communicated face to face. Old school. Low. But safe. Friday morning Collins's investigation went live. Headlines erupted across every platform. Fraud allegations rock Vanton Logistics. My hands shook as I read the first story. By noon the company's stock had dropped sharply. Former employees flooded social media. Retired workers who had lost pension money began calling journalists. Then Nicholas appeared on a television interview. He denied every single allegation. And he blamed me. He called me a bitter ex-employee who had forged documents to take revenge on a company that had simply outgrown her role. He spoke calmly and confidently, like a man with nothing to hide. I had expected lies. I had not expected what came next. Federal agents contacted Wendy 2 days later. For the first time I sat across from investigators not as a suspect but as a witness. I told them everything. Every rushed signature. Every threat. Every fake vendor I had found buried in the records. Then one agent asked me about a harbor land deal. I had no idea what he meant. Nicholas looked tired for the first time I could remember. He slid a single sheet of paper across the table. $5 million. Full confidentiality. Complete silence and walk away. My heart raced. Nicholas leaned forward and whispered, "Take it before others decide you are the problem." I pushed the paper back across the table. Weeks passed in tense silence. Then agents arrested 3 public officials. A sealed federal indictment named Nicholas Fitcher as a primary defendant. Then it was my turn. I took the stand and told everything in order. I described the boardroom, the torn contract, James' whisper in the elevator, the files I found in the middle of the night, every threat, every intimidation, every moment I considered giving up. Ronan Blake, now cooperating with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced charge, admitted on the stand that he had helped Nicholas prepare false grounds for my termination months before it happened. Nicholas took the stand himself and looked directly at the jury. He claimed I had personally designed the North Quay scheme. He said I was the one who built the fraud and then tried to pin it on him when I was caught. Then the prosecutor pressed a button. Marina surveillance footage played on a screen in the courtroom. Nicholas on the dock, pressing the memory card into my hand. Nicholas running as the headlights appeared. The jury watched in silence. I watched his story fall apart in real time. The defense had one final witness lined up. Luke Danner. He was the man I had almost married 6 years earlier. We had ended things badly and had not spoken since. When Wendy told me he was being called to testify against me, I felt the air leave the room. He took the stand and described me as bitter and driven by ambition. He said I was someone who held grudges and built narratives to get what she wanted. His words were not outright lies. They were half-truths carefully assembled to look like facts. Then Wendy cross-examined him. She produced payment records showing Luke had received a transfer of money through an account connected to Nicholas's financial network in the weeks before he agreed to testify. Luke's expression collapsed under the weight of that single fact. He admitted on the stand that he had been coached on what to say. The defense credibility cracked open completely. Investigators then confirmed my frozen bank account had not been flagged by any standard fraud detection process. The alert had been triggered manually from inside Vanton's legal department. Deliberate retaliation, fully documented. Closing arguments came and went. The jury deliberated for 1 day. Then the verdict arrived. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Nicholas Fitcher sagged in his chair as each count was read aloud. I sat in the gallery and kept my face perfectly still. Then retired Vanton employees filed a class action lawsuit to recover their drained pension funds. The civil case grew far beyond my individual claim. Dozens of names were added to the filing within a single week. The wave kept growing. Nicholas's legal team requested that he be allowed to address the court before sentencing. The judge granted it. Nicholas stood before the court and spoke for 11 minutes. He said he had targeted me specifically because I noticed patterns that everyone else had learned to ignore. When I questioned vendor costs in a meeting 3 months before my termination, he understood in that moment I would eventually see too much. He thought denying my severance and threatening my career would make me take the money and disappear. He had badly misjudged who I was. He also said there was money connected to the scheme that investigators had never found. I refused to engage with any additional bargaining. The judge sentenced Nicholas Fitcher to 18 years in federal prison. The civil judgment followed 3 weeks later. I received triple my original severance amount, full back pay for the period I had been out of work, and significant punitive damages. Vanton Logistics was placed under a court-appointed compliance monitor. But the story was not finished. 2 weeks after sentencing, a federal agent came to Wendy's office and placed a document on the table in front of me. It was a trust deed. My name appeared on it as the named beneficiary. The agent explained that a financial instrument had been set up in my name without my knowledge or consent. Nicholas had planned one final attempt to tie me to his scheme even from a sentencing hearing. It was not over yet. Investigators believed Nicholas had placed my name on the trust document without my consent to create a false connection to unreported funds. If the scheme had remained hidden, it might later have been used to implicate me further. Then a former mail clerk at Van Ton reached out through Wendy's office. He had held on to a sealed letter from Nicholas with instructions to deliver it to me if Nicholas was ever convicted. I opened it standing at Wendy's kitchen counter. In the letter, Nicholas wrote plainly that he had denied my severance because completing my exit paperwork honestly would have required disclosing accurate financial records from my department. And accurate records would have exposed the fraud. One honest piece of paperwork threatened the entire machine. So one lie became many. My original severance dispute had been the first domino all along. Not revenge. Not ambition. Just a contract. Truth written on a page. A full year passed after the verdict. The committee used my account as part of a broader push for reform. The changes moved slowly through the process, as these things always do. But they moved. Nicholas filed an appeal from prison. It was reviewed and rejected on every ground his attorneys raised. The judgment was final. One evening James arrived at my apartment carrying a framed document under his arm. He had found my original employment contract, the one Nicholas had torn in half on the day I was fired. He had it carefully restored and mounted behind glass. He handed it to me without saying anything. I hung it on the wall above my desk. Then my phone buzzed with a message from a number I did not recognize. It was short. You missed one account. No name. No context. No way to trace it. Part of me had always suspected that some threads from a scheme this large would never be fully pulled. But I was not afraid. I was ready. We traced the message as far as we could. It led to a dead end. A disposable number. No identity attached. But the account the message pointed to was real. Investigators located it, and the recovered funds were added to the pension restitution pool. More retired workers received money they had been owed for years. I started speaking at conferences and corporate events, labor law gatherings, employee rights organizations, ethics workshops for business schools. After each event, people would wait to speak to me privately. Workers who had witnessed something wrong at their own company and were afraid of what speaking up would cost them. I began carrying a small card with Wendy's contact details to hand out at those moments. Wendy asked me one evening whether I regretted refusing the $5 million settlement Nicholas had offered. I did not pause before answering. Well, comfort purchased with silence rots from the inside. You might have the money, but you still wake up knowing what you agreed to stay quiet about. Then she asked me something unexpected. She said she was building an independent ethics advisory practice and she wanted me to join her as a founding partner. I accepted before she finished the sentence. The work I had done over the past year had not been about revenge or headlines. It had been about the truth. And the truth, I had learned, is a full-time occupation. Wendy ran for a seat on the city's corporate accountability board during the following campaign season. The race was hard-fought and sometimes brutal in the way local elections can be. She won. I traveled to visit a group of retired Van Ton employees who had begun receiving restored pension benefits. The gathering was held in a community hall with folding chairs and paper cups of coffee. An older woman took both my hands in hers when I arrived. She told me she had been rationing her medication for over a year because she could not afford her full prescription after the pension fund had been drained. Now she could buy everything she needed. She said thank you very quietly, like she was telling a secret. I had to look away because I did not want to cry in front of everyone. That single moment meant more to me than every headline. Then a documentary producer approached Wendy's office with a formal proposal. They wanted to tell the full story on film. Said yes. During the documentary filming, one of the directors asked me a question I had been quietly working through for a long time. She asked when the desire for revenge had shifted into something closer to justice. I thought about it honestly before answering. At the very beginning, I had wanted Nicholas to suffer exactly the way I had suffered. I wanted him to feel the fear and uncertainty he had deliberately placed inside me. I wanted to watch him lose. Then I learned about the workers whose pension funds had been stolen. I sat across from James in a hospital room. I read the email where Nicholas had written instructions to make me carry the blame for his own crimes. Somewhere in the middle of all that, the feeling shifted. It stopped being about what he deserved. It became about what the workers deserved. What the truth deserved. After filming Wrapped, Van Ton Logistics, now operating under new court-appointed leadership, reached out with an offer. They wanted me to return as a consulting advisor to rebuild the company's ethics and compliance framework from the ground up. Accepted. The first thing I did was walk directly to the boardroom where Nicholas had torn my contract. I stood in that room and changed the executive severance approval process myself. No more secret denials. No more torn contracts. Every step documented and reviewable. I did not do it for ceremony. I did it because that was exactly where it had started. Rebuilding Van Ton was harder than exposing it had been. Trust returns far more slowly than headlines. Employees who had watched leadership abuse its position for years did not simply accept reassurances because new people were now giving them. We spent months working on that before anything else. The most important change was a genuinely anonymous internal reporting system. Not just a policy written on paper but a protected channel with independent oversight and verified confidentiality. Workers needed to see that using it would not end their careers. 6 months after the system was activated, a junior financial analyst used it to flag an unusual pattern in a vendor bidding process. It was small, early, exactly the kind of thing that, left alone, grows into something much larger over time. We investigated it, addressed it, and used it as a training example for the rest of the organization. I used part of my civil damages award to fund a whistleblower support organization. It provided legal referrals, emergency financial help, and practical guidance to workers in other industries who were considering reporting misconduct at their own companies. The documentary aired on a streaming platform, and the response was larger than any of us had expected. Messages came in from every part of the world. Workers in different countries, different industries, different languages, all describing situations that echoed mine. Late one night, I sat alone in the Van Ton boardroom after everyone else had gone home. I realized the darkness no longer frightened me. Wendy and I developed a full ethics curriculum eventually adopted by 3 industry organizations, taught to thousands of employees across dozens of companies. One afternoon I sat down at my desk and made a final decision. I would write the full story in my own words, from the very beginning. I opened a blank page and wrote the first line. My boss refused my severance deal. He should have just paid me. I stayed with each memory long enough to write it down honestly and then kept moving forward. The book was published without fanfare through a small independent press that specialized in first-person investigative accounts. It found its audience over time. Readers from all over wrote to tell me what had connected with them most. Not the legal strategy. Not the courtroom drama. Not even the final verdict. Most people focused on one simple thing. A woman asked for what her contract said she was owed. And when a powerful man tried to bully her into giving it up, she refused. A university student who had just started her first professional job sent me a message, asking what had given me the courage to keep going when everything looked hopeless. I told her the truth. It was not courage. Not at first. It was hunger because my bank account was frozen. It was fear because someone had been inside my home. It was outrage because good people's retirement savings had been stolen from them. Courage is often what happens when necessity and anger are the only 2 things left standing. On the morning of the 1-year anniversary of the verdict, I returned to the Van Ton Logistics building before sunrise. The lobby was empty and lit with soft overnight lighting. The elevators were quiet. I took one up to the executive floor and walked down the hallway to the boardroom. I placed 2 things on the long table in the center of the room. The first was my old employee identification badge from my 14 years at the company. Worn at the edges. My photograph from a younger face. My name printed beneath it in small type. The second was the restored copy of my severance contract, the one James had framed for me. The same document Nicholas had torn in half and tossed aside. I stood there alone for a few minutes without speaking. Not as a memorial to what I had been through. As a warning about what happens when people in power believe they are beyond accountability. Then I took the elevator back down and walked out into the early morning air. James was waiting on the pavement with 2 cups of coffee. He handed me one and asked simply whether I would do it all again. I answered without hesitation. Without any doubt at all. Because fear belongs with the people who abuse power. Not with the people who choose to expose it. Years passed. People still asked me occasionally when everything had truly changed. They expected me to name the verdict, the headlines, or the federal indictment. I always gave the same answer. It changed when Nicholas tore my contract. Not because of the money it cost me. Because of what that single action revealed about how he viewed the people working for him. It showed me he believed the rules applied to everyone else and that having power meant having permission to ignore them. The moment I understood that, I stopped thinking only about my severance. I started thinking about what stopping him might actually mean for everyone else. I now spend part of my time teaching companies how retaliation against employees typically begins. It rarely starts with dramatic threats or physical intimidation. It usually starts quietly. A right denied. A complaint dismissed without record. A warning delivered casually over a phone call never meant to be documented. Stop it at that first small moment and the entire chain never forms. Then I learned that the whistleblower support fund I had established had passed a significant milestone. The organization had helped its 1,000th worker access legal support to safely report misconduct at their company. 1,000 people who had witnessed something wrong and needed help finding a way to say so. All of that started with one severance dispute. Think about that for a moment. If you ask what really fell apart when I chose to expose my boss, the honest answer is that Nicholas Fitcher was the smallest part of it. A fraud network fell apart. A system of shell companies and ghost payments running quietly for years was dismantled and shut down. Corrupt public officials lost their positions and faced criminal charges. A pension fund was restored to the workers it had been stolen from. A culture of fear inside an entire organization began to crack and eventually break. And one more thing fell apart. The belief I had carried for 14 years that loyalty alone is enough to protect you. That if you work hard and trust the people above you and never make trouble, the institution will honor its side of the arrangement. That illusion died when a man tore a piece of paper in front of me. What grew in its place was stronger. Self-respect. Evidence. The understanding that documented truth, handled carefully and without fear, is more powerful than any executive sitting behind a corner office with a legal team on speed dial. My boss thought he was protecting his operation when he denied me what I was legally owed. He was lighting a fuse. He believed that firing me would make me disappear quietly. Instead, he made me dangerous. And I watched every last thing he had built fall completely apart. My boss refused my severance deal. He should have just paid me.